Since the beginning of human thought, philosophers have sought to understand the ultimate reality that underlies everything, the ground of existence, the source of meaning, and the cause of all that is. Beyond empirical observation, beyond experience, beyond the visible universe, the mind naturally turns to questions that demand pure reason. Why is there something rather than nothing? Must existence itself have a foundation? Can there be a being whose nature is such that it must exist? These questions lead us into the deepest layers of philosophical reasoning, where the proofs for God become even more profound, abstract, and in some ways undeniable. One of the most famous of these philosophical approaches is the ontological argument, first formulated by thinkers like Anselm of Canterbury and refined by others over centuries. The argument begins with the concept of God as that than which nothing greater can be conceived. Imagine a being that possesses all possible perfections, infinite knowledge, infinite power, absolute goodness, and eternal existence. Could this being fail to exist? If it did not exist, it would be less than the greatest conceivable being. But by definition, God must be the greatest conceivable being. Therefore, God must exist. Critics have argued that this is merely a conceptual trick, but closer examination reveals that existence is not a property like color or size. It is the necessary condition for maximal greatness. In other words, the very idea of the ultimate perfect being entails its existence. Denying it would be a contradiction. Closely related is the argument from contingency, a profound insight explored by philosophers like Aquinas and Leibniz. Everything we observe in the universe is contingent. It depends on something else for its existence. A tree depends on soil, water, and sunlight. A planet depends on cosmic forces. A human depends on parents. But this chain of contingency cannot extend infinitely without explanation, for an infinite regress of dependent beings does not itself explain existence. There must exist a being that is necessary, whose existence is not contingent on anything else. This necessary being is self-existent, eternal, and the ultimate cause of all contingent reality. The logic here is absolute. If the universe contains contingent things, a necessary foundation must exist. That foundation is God. Philosophers also explore the argument from infinity and causality. Every effect has a cause. Every cause is itself an effect of some prior cause. Following this chain back, we encounter one of two possibilities, either an infinite regress of causes or a first uncaused cause. An infinite regress does not satisfy reason, for it fails to provide a grounding explanation for why there is anything at all. The chain of causation must culminate in a first cause, a self-existent being that itself requires no cause. This is not mere speculation. It is an inevitable logical conclusion. Any denial of a first cause ultimately collapses into contradiction. To say that everything has a cause while refusing to allow for a first cause is to break the very rules of reason that make causality meaningful. Another critical aspect of philosophical depth is the consideration of necessary properties in the universe. Certain truths, mathematical, logical, and metaphysical, exist independently of human minds. 2 + 2 = 4. A triangle has 3 sides, and the principle of non-contradiction holds universally. Where do these necessary truths reside? They cannot emerge from chance, from atoms, or from time-bound processes. They must reflect the nature of a mind that is beyond the physical, eternal, and rational. In other words, the very structure of logic and mathematics implies a rational source: God. The argument from perfection further explores why the universe displays order, harmony, and beauty. From the spirals of galaxies to the delicate balance of ecosystems, the universe exhibits patterns that are intelligible, elegant, and coherent. These are not random. They are signs of a rational mind at work. Even the human capacity to comprehend these patterns points to a mind capable of understanding and shaping them. The universe is not chaotic. It is intelligible. This intelligibility demands a source that is itself perfectly rational and intelligent: God. The metaphysical argument adds another layer. Beyond physical causality, there is the concept of being itself, existence as such. Why does existence exist at all, rather than nothing? Why is there a reality that persists with laws, consistency, and structure? A universe of pure chance would be unpredictable, chaotic, and unintelligible. The fact that reality exists in a coherent, law-governed, and meaningful way requires a metaphysical source. That source must be timeless, self-sufficient, and necessary. It is beyond space, beyond time, and beyond limitation. This is God in his most abstract and essential form. Philosophical reflection also allows us to confront the nature of infinity and eternity. We can conceive of time extending without end, yet time itself is part of the universe. Before the universe, there was no time, no change, no motion. How, then, can a being exist outside time? Philosophy shows that a timeless, eternal, and unchanging being is necessary to account for a temporal, changing universe. God is the eternal now from which all temporality flows. When we combine these arguments, ontological perfection, necessary existence, first cause, metaphysical grounding, logical necessity, and intelligibility of the universe, we find a convergence that is striking. Each argument, approached independently, points toward a being that is eternal, necessary, all-powerful, all-knowing, and perfectly rational. Denying this being does not merely reject a religious claim, it rejects reason itself. To reject God at this philosophical depth is to deny the very principles that allow rational thought, mathematics, logic, and coherent discourse. Moreover, these philosophical arguments are not abstract exercises removed from reality. They underpin all other proofs we have seen: the physical universe, with its fine-tuning, consciousness, and morality, and even the practical implications of purpose and destiny. Philosophy allows us to see God not merely as an idea, but as the unavoidable reality behind all existence. Without such a being, nothing would have a foundation, nothing would be intelligible, and nothing would persist. God is the ultimate explanation, not one explanation among many. In this light, philosophical depth does more than reinforce belief. It elevates understanding. It shows that faith is not blind, but anchored in reason. The universe is not a random accident. It is the manifestation of necessity and perfection. Existence is not chaotic. It is grounded in eternal rationality. The mind is not isolated. It reflects the mind that made it possible. Every branch of philosophy, every meditation on causality, contingency, infinity, and necessity converges on one conclusion: God is not a hypothesis to be tested, but the absolute reality that sustains all things. To reject these truths is not to engage in debate. It is to abandon the very framework of reason that allows debate to exist. And to accept them is to open one's mind to the profound certainty that there is a being whose nature is necessary, eternal, perfect, and rational, the being we call God.